Hey, everybody. I hope you're having a great night. So happy to have you here today. If you were here yesterday, welcome back. I must have not bored you too badly yesterday, so I'm excited to have you here again. If you missed yesterday and this is your first time, welcome. I'm so excited and honored to have you here for this 4-day training session. Like I said, if you missed yesterday, the entire lesson was recorded and can be found on this channel, so you can go and check it out whenever you want, after this call, tomorrow, over the weekend, whenever you so choose. So do check that one out. Tonight, I'm really excited to have you all here to talk about resumes, one of my favorite topics. I'm kind of weird. I love talking about resumes. I love writing resumes. And I'm really excited to talk to you all about this important topic. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I mentioned yesterday that a lot of my free resources are gonna be available to you. If you've already signed up or registered for this training session officially, you should have gotten an email over the last couple of days with all those resources available to you. But you can also email me as well, and I'll give you that email here later today. But let me go ahead and share my screen. All right. Cool. Let me make sure it's working here. All right, everybody. I mentioned this yesterday. I'm going to mention it again really quick. If you have questions throughout today's lesson or any lesson over the next three more days that we have together, feel free to ask them in the chat at any time. You can also email me during the lesson, afterwards, or whenever else, and I'll do my best to answer them either privately, if it's a private kind of question, or as a group as well. If I think the whole group can benefit from it, I think I'll answer this here as well. So let's dive right in on resumes. Some of you probably have never written a resume before. If that is the case for you, feel free to comment that. If it's been more than 5 years and you've touched your resume, share that as well. Interesting to hear what people's experiences are with resumes. But coming from a law enforcement background, like many, if not all of you are, myself included, resumes really weren't a thing or aren't a thing in law enforcement. My last 3.5 years in law enforcement, I oversaw the recruiting, background investigation, and hiring unit for my agency. And I think we had candidates submit a resume, but it really didn't matter. It was more of a check in the box saying that we had that document in the file. It wasn't anything that we looked at that closely, and it certainly wasn't going to be the make or break decision whether or not someone would be hired. Same thing with promotional processes. You know, if you put in for a promotion to sergeant or lieutenant or whatever rank or detective, you probably had to submit a resume, but even there, it didn't really matter. Your case file, what your supervisor said about you, what your coworkers said about you, how you did on your assessments, those things were all far more important than your resume. But in the private sector, the resume is pretty much everything. It's at least the very first thing most companies will see or learn about you. And oftentimes, it'll be the only thing they see about you if they decide not to move forward with you in the process. And to even have a chance to interview, your resume has to be incredibly strong to even have a chance in this very, very competitive job market. You know, yesterday I mentioned a few stats about the current job market. And if you haven't applied for jobs yet, you're unfortunately maybe experiencing it soon, but the current job market is really, really tough. And so much of it has to do with the sheer number of candidates that are out there. And the fact that you're most likely competing against 300 or 400 or 500 or even more candidates for any single role at a given time. And the resume is going to be one of the first things, if not the only thing, recruiters will see about you. So that's why I really have a huge passion for this topic, because I feel like a lot of law enforcement officers really struggle with writing a resume that really highlights what they bring to the table and what value they offer to the private sector. You know, the resume might sound great for a law enforcement application or promotional process kind of deal. But if you're trying to go into the private sector, you have to articulate your things a little bit differently, and you have to showcase them in a very different way than you would if you were trying to promote or whatever else. I've now written, I don't even know, well over 500 resumes for law enforcement officers, from patrol officers and deputy sheriffs, correctional officers, all the way up to deputy chiefs and sheriffs and really high-ranking officials, from very small agencies to even the country's largest agencies. And unfortunately, I see a lot of the same mistakes regardless of rank. And most resumes coming from law enforcement officers are currently just not strong enough to really have a chance in the private sector. So I do hope tonight will help you with that. Again, feel free to ask questions. I love this topic, but let's get right into it. So a resume is a document where you can highlight your professional experience and talk about what you've accomplished throughout your career and really showcase your value to an employer. It's your first impression. Yesterday, I mentioned a stat that was done. A study was done to show what the average amount of time that a recruiter spends on a resume. So if they open up a resume, how long are they looking at that resume? And they found that on average, it's 7.4 seconds. So 7.4 seconds is as much time as you get from a recruiter to make a first impression, to really highlight your qualifications and what you bring to the table. And if you're not doing enough in those 7.4 seconds to draw them in and get them to read more, you're not going to make it in the hiring process. You're going to get disqualified or rejected from that role and not move further. And the rejection emails and the ghosting from companies will start to pile up, and your frustration will get larger and larger for sure. The resume is a great place to showcase your skills and experience. So you really want to dive into what you've accomplished in your law enforcement career. And you really want to use data and metrics whenever possible when you're writing a resume. I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but having a metrics-driven resume is one of the most important things that you can do. And that's probably the biggest mistake I see law enforcement officers, and honestly other candidates as well, make, is that their resumes are far too generic. And it sounds way more like a job description than it does an achievements-driven document that really highlights what you bring to the table. If you were a patrol officer and you put on your resume that you responded to emergency calls for service, that's great and all. I appreciate your service. That's wonderful. But that doesn't differentiate you from the other 800,000, 1 million, whatever law enforcement officer numbers there are out there. It does not do enough to differentiate you from anybody else. It can be said for any officer out there. So you want to make it far more tailored to what you've done and really bring data and metrics into the equation to highlight your skills and qualifications. A resume is a good place to show your professionalism. Again, it's the first thing company sees. And if your resume is a disaster, looks disorganized, it's filled with spelling and grammatical mistakes, that's going to make a huge impression on those recruiters. So you want to make sure it looks polished and professional, and it really reflects your attention to detail and commitment to your job search process. And a lot of that even just has to do with having a good template. Some people, for whatever reason, decide to create their own template on Word or wherever else, and it just doesn't look very good, because I'm sure most of us, I for sure am not a graphic designer, and if you do it yourself, it's going to look terrible. But at the same time, I do really encourage you to not pay for a resume template. There are so many free resources out there on resume.com. You can Google it. I'm going to give away my free resume template on here as well. So feel free to use it. I'll show you how it looks shortly, but have a good professional template that looks really clean and organized and is really thought out, not just a bunch of random things thrown on there. And we're going to talk about how to make your resume look and how it should be organized extensively today, because that's really going to be the first step. If your resume, again, is a disorganized mess, chances are a recruiter won't even read that resume. Next is going to be targeted communication. So some of you and many of you have probably heard about applicant tracking systems, which is also the next bullet point. I'm combining these two together. We'll be talking about ATS systems or applicant tracking systems extensively today because they are a huge part of the private sector job search process. And tailoring your resume is absolutely essential. So many law enforcement officers think that they can create one resume and submit it for every job they apply to, even in different industries. They might apply for a job in security, and then a job in recruiting, and then a job in sales. And they're using the same resume for all those different job opportunities. And then they're wondering why they're not hearing back. And the reason you're not hearing back is because you're not tailoring your resume towards that specific job, which means you're scoring very low on the ATS scan and just not getting the chance to even interview for a role. But we'll dive into that shortly. Resumes are a good marketing tool. And again, at the very end, it's a good way to prepare for interviews as well. Many of you have probably been in law enforcement for 20, 30 plus years, and it can be hard to remember everything that you've accomplished. So going over your resume before an interview and reviewing what you've done, remembering some of the data and metrics that you've included and some of your biggest achievements can really refresh your memory and prepare you for that interview to make sure you put your best foot forward. Especially again in this challenging job market where landing an interview itself is a massive achievement. Unfortunately, if you get the chance to interview for a job, you want to be as prepared as possible because you never know when the next chance will come along for you to interview for a job. So you want to be as prepared as you possibly can be. Okay, so in my job as recruiting hero, so I don't think I introduced myself very extensively today. Excuse me. So my name is Colin. I left law enforcement after about 8 years in service and went into the recruiting industry, then started my own business, which is Recruiting Heroes LLC. And my business does two things. One side is working with law enforcement officers to help them transition to the private sector. The other side is working with companies that want to hire law enforcement officers, military veterans, and other first responders as well. So between those two different roles that I kind of play, I see a crap ton of resumes every single day. And 99% of them are pretty terrible. I decided to show two resume examples that I've received in the last couple of weeks. I didn't want to make them law enforcement ones, so I made them just random civilian ones that came in, just to show you the quality of some resumes that I receive. And unfortunately, there are many of them just like this. And these are extreme examples, but there are also other ones that are just mediocre at best, and they're not going to do very well. So these are actually two resumes. I'm sorry, there's no space in between them. But the one on the left, I took the name off for that person's privacy. But you can see there's no executive summary. There's no skills section. The work experience gives some information. You know, we have the job title, we have the location and dates of employment. Those are all good things, but absolutely no achievements, no job duties, nothing in there that tells me what they did in those roles. So for overall, pretty crappy resume. There's an education section which just lists their high school. I'll mention this later again, but I actually recommend not including your high school information on your resume. Certainly not the dates, but even high school in general. I'm a big believer of only putting things on your resume that are going to help you. Saying that you have a high school diploma, it's not going to help you. It's going to be pretty much assumed that you have a high school diploma or a GED or something similar. So if you have no higher education than high school, no worries, but I would leave that completely off your resume. And the reason why I personally don't like dates on a resume is because ageism is an absolute thing in the private sector. It shouldn't be, it's illegal, but it absolutely is. And if you put on your resume that you graduated college in 1975 or whatever, they can do some pretty quick math to figure out how old you are. And it may not be the type of person that they're looking for based on the age, which is, again, ridiculous. Okay, so the one on the right is even worse. Again, I took the name off for privacy. There's, again, no summary. There's a short skills section at the bottom, which is very minimal. Work experience. They have, I think, a job title, SQL, DBA, whatever that is. I'm pretty positive it's a tech term, but I have no clue what it really is. No company name, no dates of employment. They do have a bachelor's degree, which is great. But again, what's the degree in? What university? Any of that kind of stuff is all not there. So these are two examples of ones you do not want to copy. So next, I'm going to show you what my template looks like. So on the left here is an example of a resume that I've recently written for a law enforcement officer. I did change it up a little bit, took the name off and changed a few things. But this is the first page of my resume template. Again, if you like this template, if you think it looks great, you're very welcome to use it. I give it away for free, and you can have it and use it yourself. It's very easy to plug and play your information in there. So feel free. If you think it's hideous and don't like it, don't tell me that. It'll hurt my feelings. But you don't have to use it, obviously, as well. But this is the template that I like to use. I use it for my own resume as well as the resumes I write for my law enforcement candidates. And to start off, how long should a resume be? There used to be the old standard that a resume should be just one page. That was the standard in the 90s and early 2000s. That's gone away. The new standard now in the private sector is a 2-page resume. 2 pages is what I recommend for almost all of my candidates. If you are very high level, executive level in a large agency, agent in charge in the FBI or some higher level role, you can maybe go on to the 3rd page, but I would be very strategic and not just fill it with a bunch of fluff. I'd rather see 2 pages that are really powerful and data and metrics driven than 3 pages just filled up with nonsense, all right? So 2 pages is the ideal length for private sector roles. If you want to go into the federal government, you want to apply through USA Jobs, which is the biggest place to apply for federal jobs. The old standard there was you could go up to 5 or 6 page resumes. That changed in September of 2025. So just, what is that, 5 months ago. At the end of September of last year, USA Jobs and the federal government announced that basically every organization in the federal government will no longer accept resumes that are over 2 pages long. And this was a big change for people in the federal government trying to find other federal government work or trying to get into it. They would have six-page resumes and have to overnight figure out how to get their resume down to 2 pages. So for basically everything you might want to apply for after law enforcement, a 2-page resume is the way to go. So I'm just going to walk through what I think a good resume should include and the general layout, how I like to do it. Now, you could talk to 10 different recruiters or resume writers and probably get 10 different answers about what they should look like and all that. At the end of the day, you should really decide what's best for you. But I do think there are some certain very elemental and critical things to have on your resume. And those were the ones I want to focus on today. But again, the order and things like that, again, can be up for interpretation and what you like to do. This is how I like to do it. So again, take it with a grain of salt. So at the very top, I like to do first name. I didn't actually put it on here, but I like to do first name and last name. If you have a preferred name, you certainly can use it. Just make sure it's something that's appropriate. Don't put the name on there, the nickname your attorneys in college gave you or anything like that, right? It's a professional document. Keep it professional. Below that, I have my contact information line, which I put into a blue color. I'm not big in, I don't believe in a bunch of colors in your resume. This is the extent that I think is the most you should do. I've seen resumes that look like a rainbow, right? With a whole bunch of different colors. I wouldn't do that. It should not be it's not supposed to be the most beautiful thing in the world or very, very colorful. It's supposed to be very professional, which I think this template gets across pretty well. But on this one, things to include: location. A lot of people put their entire address on there. I actually recommend against that. Most companies, all they really need to get started is your city and state. That's it. So for me, I could put I'm in Boyce, Virginia, or if you're in Washington, D.C., or wherever else you might be. There's a good chance you can be applying for, potentially dozens of jobs, right? And in each job, your resume might be passed around to 10 to 15 to 20 different people. Do you really want hundreds or maybe even thousands of people knowing your exact address? I know I certainly wouldn't. And trust me, if you make it to the hiring process, the HR team from whatever company you end up joining will 100% ask you for your address. So make sure just put your city and state. One thing to do here as well is if you're open to relocating, I would put a parentheses after your city and state and put in there open to relocation. Or if the job is somewhere different, you can also again say, hey, I'm open to moving to Miami, Florida, even though I live in Virginia now. That is very important. If a recruiter is looking at 2 different resumes and they're both equally awesome candidates, one lives in the city where the job is, another one lives across the country, and they can only interview one person, they might not even bother to ask you, hey, are you cool with moving for this job? So you putting it on there at least alleviates that question in their mind. So I would always make sure you put in, if you're open to relocating, put it on your resume. All right, next should be your cell phone number. Please, God, please, please, please put your personal number if you're applying for an external agency. So many candidates I work with have their law enforcement cell phone number on there. And if someone calls it, it'll say, hey, you reached Lieutenant Smith with the Las Vegas MPD police department. Don't do that. Have it a personal number. And please, again, please, God, make sure that your voicemail is appropriate and that it's not completely full so that recruiters can leave you messages. They might not call you back twice. They may only call you once. And if they can't leave a message, they might move on to another candidate. So make sure personal phone number and also that your voicemail is appropriate and easy and accessible. Same deal with the email. Use your personal email. No government emails, no work emails, your personal email. And if you're like me, who had a Hotmail account up until like 3 years ago, get to the 21st century, get a Gmail, get a Yahoo, get whatever else. And make sure your email is also appropriate. I've seen some pretty crazy emails on there. Again, probably ones people made when they were kids or in college, and they're very inappropriate. Don't do that. Ideally, it would be your first name dot last name at gmail.com or first initial last name at gmail.com or whatever else. Those are things that you should have as your email, and make it a clickable link. That way people, if they see your resume, they like you, they can click on it and email you right away versus having to copy and paste it and try to go through all that mess. Your job should be trying to make the recruiter's life as easy as possible. That way you increase your chances of getting reached out to. I'm a big fan of having your LinkedIn profile link on your resume. Another study was done showing that recruiters actually spend more time looking at your LinkedIn profile than they do your resume. And having your link on there makes it easy for them. They can easily click on it, go on your profile, and make sure that they like what they see. The only time I would advise against this is if your profile, if you don't have one, you can't do that, obviously. But if your profile is very incomplete and has nothing on there, I probably would leave it off. Tomorrow we'll be diving into LinkedIn, and I think it's one of the most important parts of the job search process. So make sure you come back for that. But you want to have a strong LinkedIn profile and include that link on your resume. Below the contact information, I like to have 3 job titles that kind of highlight you as a candidate. They can be things, actual ranks that you've had. They can be things like law enforcement specialist. They can also be roles that you're hoping to get into. So maybe you can say, I want to get into sales, or you want to get into corporate security. You can list those right there, and that will help you with the applicant tracking scan, which we'll talk about shortly. Below that, I like to do something a little bit differently. So a lot of resume writers obviously say you should have an executive summary, which is a paragraph summary of you as a candidate. I have that as well, but I also like to have above that a 1-sentence high-level image, a picture of who you are as a candidate. Where you talk about your experience, some of the major skills that you've had, especially skills that are very relatable to the industry you're trying to get into, and then you can even mention what industry you're hoping to get into at the very end of that sentence. But again, just 1 sentence, maybe 2 if you have to, but I prefer 1 sentence. And then you go into your executive summary, which is the summary paragraph about you as a candidate. Big things here. Make sure to not write in first person. You should never say, hey, I did this, this is me, whatever else. It should be written as I have it here. 4 to 6 sentences is what I typically recommend on a resume. It doesn't need to be much longer than that. 4 to 6 sentences is a great spot where you can really highlight who you are as a candidate, some of your major skills, mention 2 to 3 of your accomplishments. Again, if you have data and metrics, that's the best. If you can talk about the budget you managed, the number of people you supervised, your case closure rate, the programs you initiated or created, policies you developed, any of those specific things that you can highlight that you yourself did, not just that could relate to any law enforcement officer, are going to be very powerful here. And again, the very last sentence, I like to tie your experience into what you're hoping to get into, and you can even name drop the company that you're applying to. Just obviously make sure you change that for your next application. Because I made a few mistakes where I was kind of in a rush and I would submit an application to say Amazon, but I had Microsoft listed on the resume. So that's a little embarrassing. So try to avoid that if you can. We'll talk about tailoring your resume shortly, but your executive summary is a fantastic place to tailor your resume, as is the next section, which I call my areas of expertise. We can also call it a skills section. Kind of go hand in hand, whatever you prefer to call it. I recommend having somewhere between 9 to 12 of your biggest or your most impressive skills on there. And try to make them things that aren't like, I'm a hard worker, motivated, passionate, things like that. Those don't really mean a whole lot. Try to figure out what exactly you want to get into, what you want to do next, what industry you want to get into. Like we talked about yesterday, reading through those job postings and job descriptions and seeing what skills these companies are looking for. And if you have a certain skill set that they're looking for and it relates to your time in law enforcement, I would include that on there. But even if you're still unsure what you want to do, some of the main skills you can list on there, you can do, if project management, if you led a project, instructing, if you're an instructor, crisis management, crisis intervention, incident response, risk assessment is a very big one for anyone trying to get into security or investigations. Maybe data analysis. If you were into technology, you can put something about your tech experience, body-worn camera experience, anything that you have that really highlights what you've done. And again, they should be 1 to 2 words max. No sentences or anything like that, just 1 or 2 keywords that really highlight your biggest achievements. And this is one of my favorite parts of the resume to tailor because it's so easy. And we'll talk about that again here shortly. Next, we're going to go into your professional experience. This is your actual work history, where you talk about the roles that you've had in your career and what exactly you did in those roles and what you've accomplished and some of the major job duties. I'm not big on job duties. I like more achievements and metrics behind it, but some job duties, of course, are required or essential to have in there as well. One of the things I see, which is kind of odd, I'll see some candidates start with their very first job they ever had and go in chronological order from there. So I've seen resumes for like majors, right, or lieutenants for agencies. And the very first job on their resume is the job at McDonald's they had when they were a teenager. So then I have to go down the next job. Then I was, I don't know, I was a waiter at a restaurant, and then I was a patrol officer, then a sergeant, and then all the way up to whatever rank they were. That was way down at the bottom. Remember what I said at the beginning of today's call? The average recruiter spends about 7.4 seconds looking at your resume. So you have 7.4 seconds to impress them, which typically means you have this very first page to impress them, to get them to be invested in you as a candidate and to read on. So you have to start this section with your current or most recent job first. So whatever job, if you're retired right now, you had a year off, put your most recent job first. Here's how I like to lay it out. I like to have the agency or organization's name, the location of that organization, and then the dates, your full dates with that organization, right? So the day you're hired until the day you left, or present if you're still there. So that's gonna be the whole big picture. Below that is where you'll start listing out the different positions you've had. So for this candidate, he was a police lieutenant. Even though he had been with his agency since May of 2013, he was only a police lieutenant from January 2023. So that's why you'll have 2 dates. You should have 2 dates, at least 2 dates on most sections of your resume, especially if you had multiple roles. If you had one role, you'd only have to have one date range. But if you had multiple roles, you would want to have all of those. So then you want to go down and use bullet points to highlight what you've achieved and tasks you were assigned to and what you did throughout your time in that position. These should be bullet points. The only place in your resume that you should ever have paragraphs should be the executive summary paragraph at the top of your resume. See, a lot of law enforcement officers use paragraph format for their work experience. Paragraph format is incredibly tough on the eyes, especially for recruiters who are, again, scanning your resume and trying to pick out the most important things from your resume to see whether or not you're a good fit for the candidate, for the role that they're trying to hire for, excuse me. So I can tell you, when I look for roles, I try to give everyone a fair chance, but sometimes you're just super rushed and you have a ton of candidates. You're going to be very, very quick with your review. And if I know for sure that my client, the company I'm representing, is looking for candidates to have these 5 things, that's what I'm looking for in that resume. Do they have these 5 things? And if I see a giant block of text, my first reaction is, crap, do I need to read all that? And trust me, that's not the reaction you want your recruiter to have when they're looking at your resume. So make it as easy as possible. So have bullet points and make each bullet point, bite size. I don't want to see bullet points that are 6 or 7 lines long. 2 is ideal. You see in this one, there's a 3rd line. Those are probably the max you should be. So it should really just be 1 sentence, max 2 per bullet point. Again, I prefer 1 if at all possible. And try to start with your most impressive basically your most impressive experience for that role first and go down from there. So if you, like this person, if you oversaw a $21 million budget, you should probably highlight that over saying, hey, I mentored fellow officers, which again is important. But if you're trying to get a leadership role in the private sector, you having managed such a large budget is going to be far more impressive than something that's less impressive, just kind of, personality, relationship building kind of deals, which again is important, but companies are looking for numbers and they want to see those kind of things. So figure out what is the most impressive thing you did in that role and have that one listed first. And this again will be tailored down the road as well. And then what you do is go backwards from there. So you start with the current or most recent job first, and you work your way backwards throughout your career. So we're going on to the second page now. So next, this gentleman, I think I may have skipped a rank, but anyway, so what you would do is next is, let's say you had another role in this agency. You would put that next role and then the dates for that position. Again, you'd have this full range above, but then you have the individual dates per role in that position. And once again, you would go through bullet points for those roles as well. If you work for multiple agencies or different companies, you can also differentiate that like I do here with a blue line. You would again put the agency's name, organization's name, the location, and then again the dates, the full date range for that position. As you see, this one here was a Becker Police Department. He only ever was a police officer there. So the date range listed above is all he needs. There's no need for an extra date range next to the police officer. So I hope that makes sense. Many of you have probably had, 10 different roles in your agency. And many of those have happened over a course of 20 or 30 years. What recruiters are really, really most interested in is the roles that you've had in the past 10 years or so. So that's what I want you to focus on. So many candidates I see want to go into detail about every role they had. I'll see police majors who will have their major role, their captain role, their first lieutenant role, their second lieutenant role, their sergeant role, their deputy first class role, their deputy role, their recruit role, or whatever else. So they'll have, 8 different positions on there. And by doing that, you're minimizing the amount of space that you can dedicate to your most impressive roles, which is probably your highest ranking roles, or the roles that are most relevant to the role you want to get into next. So what I recommend you do, focus on the roles you've had in the last 10 years, 10 or 12 years, whatever. If there's a little bit of overlap, that's not a big deal. Anything beyond that, what I would do is what I did here is create an additional positions section where you would simply list out the roles you had earlier. So this person was a police officer with an Annandale Police Department and also was with another agency. Just list those out as I did here. I'm not going into more details on those roles. There are 2 exceptions to this. One is military. Let's say you were military before you were in law enforcement. I would make a military section where you would go into a little bit of detail about your military experience. If it was 30 years ago, again, it doesn't have to be massive detail, but I would still make it very, very obvious that you are a military veteran. The reason why a lot of companies really value hiring military veterans. Some get tax breaks for doing so. Other ones like to highlight it on their website that they have this many military veterans in their organization. So it really does help you to highlight the fact that you are a military veteran on your resume. So that's one exception. The other exception is if the role you're hoping to apply for is one you held previously, more than 10 years ago. So let's say you were in asset protection before you became a cop. Then you did 10 years of law enforcement, decided you wanted to leave, and now you want to go back into asset protection as a supervisor, right? You would want to highlight the fact that you were in that exact industry before law enforcement and highlight some of your experiences there. That way, someone reads your resume, they say, oh, this person has 10 years in law enforcement, but he or she also has done the exact role we're now hiring for. So those are the 2 exceptions I would say about highlighting experiences that are beyond your 10 years. And again, if you want to keep it to 2 pages and really highlight the roles you've had recently, it's going to be nearly impossible to do that by listing everything you've ever done in any kind of role. Again, a 2-page resume, it's very tough to do for anybody who has done 20 plus years in law enforcement. If you have questions, by the way, make sure you do put in the chat. I'm happy to answer them throughout the presentation. It doesn't have to be at the end either. So feel free to drop a question at any time. I have my cell phone here, so I'm looking at the comments here if they come in. Yesterday, there were some really good questions, so I do appreciate that. All right. After you finish going through your entire work history, I then go on to an education section. And the education, this one, I have an education and training. I don't know why I did that. Usually it's just education. And here, what I want you to do is focus on, again, the education that you've had that's beyond the high school level. If you all have high school, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. I would take the education section completely out, leaving more room to focus on other areas of your experience. But let's say you have an associate's degree or bachelor's or master's, you would list them here. I always put the school name, university name. You can put the location if you want to, not super critical. The degree type, the degree and the degree type as well. You'll notice on here, I do not have the date. Doesn't matter, leave it off. I do not have the GPA. Nobody gets a crap, leave it off as well. I don't have interest or field of study or the fact I played soccer for my university. No one gives a crap about that either. Leave all of that off. Everything on your resume needs to show the recruiter, the hiring manager, why you are the best fit for that specific role. And again, the fact that you were in whatever Greek fraternity you were in doesn't matter for the most part. So leave those things kind of off. The next section is going to be your certifications and trainings section. This is a tough one for a lot of law enforcement officers because I'm sure, like me, you all probably have training files that are dozens of pages long. And if you try to list every single certification you have, it would probably, again, be dozens of pages long. What I want you to do is figure out what are the 10 to 12, 15 or so most important certifications for the roles you're hoping to get into, or the most important ones in general. Think of things like, the FBI LEADA course. If you went to the Reed interview and interrogation course, that's a really popular one. If you went to the FBI National Academy, 100% want to highlight that. Any leadership ones, any technical ones, anything that's related to the field you want to get into is going to be really important. I say this story sometimes, it's not really a story, but when I was in law enforcement, I became a beanbag shotgun certified operator. So I got a certification to have a beanbag shotgun in my car, which was pretty cool. Never got a chance to use it, which is probably a good thing. But I was trying to go to the tech industry, right? Would the fact that I had a beanbag shotgun certification matter at all to get into that industry? Absolutely not. So I left that off my resume, and you should as well. Figure out what you want to do next, and then figure out what are the most important certifications and trainings that you have that you want to highlight on that resume. And if you're really proud of all your experience, you can always put a line on there on the bottom of that section saying entire training file available upon request or something similar, letting them know that you have more trainings above and beyond what's listed here. But again, I don't want this section to take up too much space because it's going to take away from your other sections. The amount I have here is probably the longest you should have it, if at all possible. Now, if you still have room at the end, I like to have an honors and awards section where you highlight some of the awards and honors that you've received. I think it's cool. It's a good talking point. It kind of highlights what you've accomplished. If you have a cool award, so you got a life-saving award or you got a valor award or whatever else, those are all cool things to highlight. I was honored to be named the 2019 Deputy Sheriff of the Year for the entire state of Virginia, which was awesome. So I put that on my resume because that was a cool talking point. But let's say you get to this point here where this resume is, and you're at the bottom of the second page, and you have no room for honors and awards, and you ask yourself, should I delete other stuff to make room for it? Absolutely not. The honors and awards is a nice to have, not a requirement. So if you have a little bit of room on the second page, I would put it right at the bottom, and again, list top 5 to 10 awards you've had that are really that you're really proud of, and that kind of speaks to your work ethic and what you accomplished in your law enforcement career. But that's basically the layout that I recommend for anyone looking to go to the private sector. Again, this entire resume is available. If you sign up for this course officially through the link that I had put out there, you should have got an email today with all the downloadable resources that I've gone through the last 2 days. You can also scan the QR code if you're available to scan it. If you're on your phone, it might be a little tougher. But you're also very welcome to email me. I'll put my email up on the slide at the end of this. And I'll be happy to send you my resume template, and you're very welcome to use it. I also have what I call my Heroes Job Search Guide, which includes the template, but it also includes some more detailed instructions about how to write a very strong resume. That might help you as well, because some of you might look at this and say, man, my resume doesn't look anything like this. That's totally fine. I do this for a living. I write resumes every single day. And some of you might think my resume sucks, which is, that's your opinion as well. It's fine as well. But if you like what you see here, go through that guide and hopefully it'll help you a lot. Some of you might ask about resume writers, professional resume writers, and what I think of them. I'll start off by saying that's what I am. So take anything I say with a grain of salt. I think there are some very, very good resume writers out there, and some really sketchy and crappy ones out there as well. What I would recommend for law enforcement officers, if you decide you want to go the route of paying someone to write your resume, find somebody with a law enforcement background that can articulate this skill set. And it's not just me. There are other ones out there as well. There's not a ton, but there are some out there that have a law enforcement background that write resumes. Because I find that's, at least for me, I've written resumes for people from other industries in the past, and I've always felt that they were never nearly quite as strong as the resumes that I write for law enforcement officers, because I just didn't understand exactly what they've been through, what it entailed being in that job. So I think having that background is very important. Resume writers can range from, not super expensive to well over $1,000, which I think is a little crazy. So pick and choose all that as well. And anyway, that's enough about that topic. But if you have any questions about resume writers who I recommend besides myself, I'll be happy to let you know that as well. Okay. In the comments section, let me know if you've ever heard of applicant tracking systems before, or this is the first time you've ever heard of them. If you're in the job market right now, you probably have. But if you're just leaving law enforcement or thinking about leaving law enforcement, this might be the first time you've ever heard of them. But applicant tracking systems are software that are utilized by basically every single major, mid-level, even small private sector company in the private sector. And what they do is they help recruiters and hiring managers stay organized with their hiring processes. Heard of them? Not sure the term exactly. Cool. Well, I'll go through it today, and you'll actually get to see a screenshot of my applicant tracking system, so you can get an inside view of what a recruiter sees. So basically, how ATS systems work. So there are a lot of job boards out there, right? There's dozens of job boards: LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, Dice, USA Jobs, Google Jobs, and a crap ton more. If I wanted to advertise in all those jobs individually, it would take me forever. Worked in HR prior to going to certified and used an ATS for applications. Awesome. So you know it very, very well then. The ATS systems, from my experience, are quite useful for the recruiters and hiring teams, not necessarily very beneficial to job seekers. But let's say that I am a recruiter and I'm trying to hire a security manager. What I would do, I would go into my applicant tracking system. I would write up the job description. I would put the job title in, the location. I'm a big believer in always advertising the salary. So I'd put that in there, the entire job description, and then I would hit submit. What'll happen then is my applicant tracking system will automatically upload that job board to all the job boards that I'm partnered with, or my ATS is partnered with. So for the ATS system, this applicant tracking system that I use is about 30 different job boards. So at one click of one button, the job posting will go up to all the job boards that we're associated with. So again, it'll go to Indeed, it'll go to Monster, Google Jobs, and all the other ones. When you as a candidate go to apply for that job, no matter what platform you apply on, I should say, I guess, your resume or your application, usually just resume, will get funneled back into my applicant tracking system. So it's in one central location. So I, as a recruiter, don't have to go to each individual platform to write the job posting. I also don't have to go to each platform to download resumes. They all come into one location. How my system works then is, and I think it's pretty much the same for other ones as well, the system will then scan your resume and scan the job description and give the recruiter a percentage score of how close of a match you are to that job description. And it'll give an actual percentage score. And it'll also then do that for all the other candidates it receives. And then it'll rank them from the highest scoring candidate down to the lowest scoring candidate. Now, for the most part, recruiters in the private sector, especially those that are external recruiters or ones working for recruiting firms, many of them are working 10 to 20 jobs at a given time. And I mentioned earlier, the average job opening right now is getting about 300 or so applications per opening. So each recruiter is getting a crap ton of resumes. And the chances that they're going to read through all of them is basically zero. A lot of recruiters work either fully on commission or heavily incentivized based on commission. So they're trying to hire as quick as they can. So if I'm a recruiter and I'm looking for the security manager job and I got 300 applications, the system says, hey, Colin, these are the top 10 based on our scan. A lazy, overworked, or someone just rushing through the process recruiter may only look at those top 10 resumes, read through those top 10, maybe pick out 3 or 4 people from them, that top 10 that they want to interview, and basically reject the rest. So if your resume comes in at number 11, or God forbid, number 200, your resume won't even be seen by human eyes. So you'll be rejected by the recruiter at that point in time. A lot of candidates think that these systems are automatically rejecting them. From my experience, that's not really the case. More likely what's happening is, again, you're scoring very low based on the scan, and then the recruiter's making the decision that you're to disqualify you or remove you from the process because of that. So it's not really the system that's doing it. So if anyone tries selling you a product or service about beating an ATS, to get basically making it like they're going to trick the system, those things are all scams, and I wouldn't believe it. It's going to be far more important about tailoring your resume, which we'll talk about here shortly. This is kind of reviewing what I just said. All right, here's just an example of an applicant tracking system, my applicant tracking system, and how it would look. So I was looking for a talent acquisition specialist. I think it's like 2 or 3 years ago at this point now. So I posted the job, and under the new candidates column, you can see that there's a couple of candidates here. It goes much further down and much further up as well, but I just took a snapshot here. So it has their name, and it has their title, which they pull from the resume, and it has the company's name for their most recent role, again, which you pulled from the resume. Below their name, or below the little dot, you'll see a percentage score. So 13%, 10%, and 10%. So those candidates were not the greatest fit, but that's the percentage score for how close of a match they were to the job description based on the scan as my ATS did. And that's basically happening for every role that's out there. And your resume is going to be scanned. It's going to fall into whatever position you're landing in, and it's going to go from there. So what a lot of candidates really focus on is trying to keyword stuff their resume or trying to get as close of a match as they possibly can. And yes, and tailoring a resume is very important, but always remember that at some point you're going to move past this phase of the hiring process and your resume will still be looked at by an actual human. And it still has to make sense. And when you're just stuffing random words in there from the job description, it's going to be very obvious. So don't just do that. I've seen candidates get 100% scores before. And I'm like, that's kind of bizarre how that happened. I guess they didn't realize it was a cop. And what I found out was these people would copy and paste the entire job description, put it in size like 0.5 font, put it in white writing, and then paste it down the bottom of the resume. So basically, if the resume were scanned, they would score basically a perfect score because every single word from the job description was on their resume. Don't do that either. That's going to get you disqualified from the process, and it's just a crappy thing to do, and it doesn't work. So go ahead and leave that out. But this is how my applicant tracking system looks. And this is like a mid-level one. There's better ones, there's worse ones. It's fine. But typically, this is how it looks when a system does their scans and how you're going to be stacked based on how well you perform on that scan. So how do you tailor your resume? It's a big question, and one that it can take a lot of time when you're first getting started. It can also be done a little bit more efficiently. But it all starts and honestly ends with really spending time looking through the job description and seeing what exactly this company is looking for and trying to figure out what are the keywords from that job description, the key skills, the key qualifications that this company is looking for. So this is a head of security role in Washington, D.C. So I was reading through it and just thinking, what of these things would be important to highlight on a resume? So this one, I highlighted strategic working relationships, risk-based approach, allocate security resources, risk appetite, risk tolerance, threat landscape, policy development, functional domains, security management systems, integrated management system, and numerous other ones. Those are the words that I thought, man, this is what they're looking for. And this is what I encourage you to do as well. You can print off the whole job description you want to and highlight it like I did here. You can put it down in a Word doc. You can do numerous other things. But what you want to do is read through the entire job description and make sure the wording that they're using and the skills that they're looking for on the job description are reflected on your resume. So if there's a skill they're looking for and you realize, crap, I don't have that on my resume, or I have it written in a totally different way, that's where you would want to go in and rewrite that section of your resume, not the entire thing, that little portion, to make sure it is in line with the role they're looking for. Same thing with certifications and trainings and education and things like that. If they say, hey, for this role, you have to have a CompTIA Security Plus certification, and you have one, and for whatever odd reason you didn't put it on your resume, you would want to then go back in and make sure you add that. So that's why it's important to keep a training file and qualification file, certification file, where you can easily plug and play. So if you have 10 certs on your resume and you realize, oh, this one isn't really important, but this one over here is important, you can easily switch that out. So that's what you want to do for pretty much every resume you apply to, job you apply to. And some of the easiest sections I think that you can tailor are the executive summary, which is the paragraph near the top of the resume. Here you would want to use, when you're highlighting your skills and achievements and things like that, you would want to use the keywords and qualifications and highlight skills that are relevant to the job you're applying for. If I want to get into security management, the fact that I led a recruiting team may not be super relevant, or the fact that I oversaw polygraphs or whatever else may not be super relevant. But if I apply for a recruiting role, those would be very important. So I would highlight those. So you want to make sure that whatever you're highlighting throughout your entire resume is highlighted, is important for that role. Because nowadays, just being a good employee or a good candidate is no longer enough. Every single line of your resume and every bullet point needs to highlight why you are the best fit for that specific role. And this, like I said earlier, does take some time, and some people don't want to do that. So when I see, some posts on LinkedIn about people saying they've applied to, 1,000 jobs in the last month, what that tells me is that they're most likely not spending the time doing this. They're hitting the easy apply button. They're applying for jobs with the same generic resume and hoping something sticks. And I say this all the time to my candidates. I would rather see you only apply to 1 or 2 jobs a day, but really spend time on that application versus seeing you apply to 10 jobs a day, but you're sending the same generic resume, the same generic cover letter everywhere. But back to this really quick. The skills section is a very, very easy and good place to tailor your resume. On the template that I use, there are 12 skills that I have listed for my candidates. So ideally, every one of those 12 skills would be a skill or requirement from the job description exactly as it's written. You might have that you're good at mentoring, let's just say. But on the job description, they want someone who's experienced with coaching. Very similar skills, but the wording is a little different. So I would go in there and change mentoring to coaching. Or you might have that you are a firearm, you're proficient with firearms. You have firearms as a skill, but you're applying for an office job where firearms don't matter whatsoever. Take firearms off and try to find a skill from the job description that you have that you can highlight, while of course always being very honest about that as well. The professional experience section is a little harder to tailor, but is one that's important as well. The best thing I say there is, at the very least, organize your bullet points to highlight the skills that are most closely aligned with that role and put those first. So if you have a skill, a bullet point that's really, really in line with that role you're applying for, but currently it's way down at the bottom of the section, move it towards the top. That way, if a recruiter is scanning your resume, that's one of the first things he or she will see, to make sure that they can tell that, oh yeah, they actually have experience with what I'm trying to hire for. And then certifications and trainings I already mentioned. That's also a very easy one that you can easily plug and play as you go along. While it might seem like a pain in the butt and a little bit time consuming, you do want to try to use exact wording from the job description whenever possible. I have a couple of examples here. You can read through them yourself, but you might have phrased your experience one way, but they're looking for the same skill, but they articulated it a different way. Try as much as you can to reorganize your bullet point, your sentences, to reflect the word and the phrasing those companies used. And again, I've mentioned this numerous times, so go ahead and read it at your own pace if you want to. Again, this PowerPoint will be available for you later as well. But quickly on resume tailoring, it is very important nowadays. If you're not tailoring your resume, chances are you're going to get a lot of rejections or not hear anything back. And usually when I talk to candidates, there's often two reasons why they're not hearing anything back for roles that they're applying for. Usually, actually three. One of them is that they're applying for roles they're just not qualified for. Last week I talked to a really nice guy, patrol officer for his entire 20 years. He was applying for a role, a high-level global security director role for a really large company, overseeing a multi-million-dollar budget and a couple thousand people. Patrol officer, that's great, but that's a pretty big jump, right? So that person might just be applying for jobs that he's not quite qualified for yet, at least. So that's one big reason. Another one, which we'll talk about tomorrow, is they're not networking effectively. Who you know is oftentimes more important than what you know. So networking is incredibly important. But then the third, and probably one of the biggest reasons, is they're not tailoring their resume towards the job they're applying for. They'll create one resume and think, oh, it's good enough, it's close enough, I'll submit this. You might as well just throw your resume into the fire, because you'll get the same exact result, which is absolutely nothing, unfortunately. So do spend the extra time. And again, it's not easy. It does take time. You can use ChatGPT or AI for assistance as well. Something as simple as, copy and pasting your resume into ChatGPT, and then copy and pasting the job description and asking it to come up to tailor certain sections of your resume towards that role. It's at least a start and give you some good ideas, but I'm always very cautious about just blindly using exactly what AI spits out. At the very, very, very least, you should be reading through it and make sure it still sounds like you. Make sure it hasn't added in anything in there that isn't accurate, because that's happened before, where candidates will do that exact thing and copy and paste without reading it. And AI is trying to make them sound like the perfect candidate, and they're making up stuff about their experience that they don't actually have. So do make sure, if you use AI, use it more as research and general information gathering than to create your entire resume. That's my opinion. Some people live and die by AI. Just be careful with how you use it. I will say that for sure. Here's a quick list of things to do and not to do. What we talked about today already. Use a clean professional layout. Oh, there may have been a question. Same with cover letters. Yes, cover letters are super important. I'm going to try to cover them tomorrow if there's time, or if not, Friday. Cover letters aren't nearly as important as they used to be, but they are still important. And cover letters are also very important to tailor. And not just tailoring. Some people think tailoring means, oh, I'll change out in the very first sentence, I'll say, I'm so excited to apply for job title. And then they'll change the job title based on the role with company X, Y, or Z, and they'll change that out. That alone isn't really enough. You want to go through the company's website, their social media, find things that interest you about them, and incorporate that into the cover letter and explain using your experience why you're a good fit based on that information that you found. But that's a whole other topic. But yeah, tailoring your resume and cover letter are very important, and you can absolutely use AI to help you with your cover letter as well. But again, be very careful with how you do it, because for recruiters who do it for a living, it's very easy to tell when someone just uses AI. And it's weird because we're in a weird stage right now with AI and other things right now where recruiters and companies are using AI extensively in their recruiting processes and hiring processes, and candidates are as well. So now there's just both sides using AI, and it's just kind of creating the giant mess that we're in right now in the hiring process. So do make sure it still sounds like you. But great comment there. I really appreciate that. Thank you. But yeah, use a clean professional layout. Again, don't pay for one. There are so many free ones out there, whether it be mine or anything else online. Just find one that looks really clean and professional. Big thing here as well, make sure you save it, or make sure it's a Word doc or a PDF. I don't know how many of you know Canva.com. Canva.com is a great place to do all kind of graphic designs and other things like that. They also do have resumes on there. The problem is a lot of those resumes are getting saved as JPEGs or other things like that that aren't scannable or not easily scannable, which means when you submit that to a job opening, they'll basically score 0% because the system can't scan a picture, or not very effectively at least. Comment here, most companies allow you to upload a cover letter along with your resume, but if you don't, for those that don't, should you submit one document with a cover letter and resume, or just submit a resume? Great question. So here's my thought on that. If they don't have anywhere to submit a cover letter, I would only submit your resume. That's just my personal opinion. There's no real hard rule on that. If they require a cover letter, obviously submit one. If it's an optional one, always submit one. Always submit one. Again, they're not nearly as important as they used to be, but I still think going the extra mile and showing you actually give a crap about them and making that extra effort will pay off in the long run. Even if it doesn't pay off immediately, it will pay off for you in the long run. But if it only has an option for resumes, I would only submit the resume just to make sure you're really compliant with their processes, and not, you might get somebody who's had a bad day and said, well, we sent the resume and they put both on there. So they're out of they can't follow instructions kind of deal. But that's what I would recommend. But again, that's not really a hard or fast rule, just kind of my personal opinion. But really good question. I think that was Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. But yeah, so make sure you don't use a JPEG or anything else like that. Word doc, PDF are usually the ways to go. And some companies prefer one or the other, so just make sure you do read that. There's free sites online where you can change a Word doc to a PDF and vice versa. So make sure you do that. Resume should only be 1 to 2 pages in length. Like I said, ideally use 2. To really score highly on a scan, an ATS scan, it's tough to do all that in a 1 page. So I really recommend going onto your 2nd page and using the space you have. For font, I like Calibri or Times New Roman. There are a few other ones that are good as well, but just make sure it's very easy to read. I've seen some crazy fonts where people try to be too creative. Unless you're trying to go into the arts or something where, being creative actually matters, keep it very, very, honestly, just boring, the font. It should be very easy to read and shouldn't be the person reading your resume shouldn't even think about what font it is. They should just be reading that information. If their mind wanders to, I wonder what font this is, it's probably not the right font for a resume. Bullet point format. Pretty much your entire resume should be bullet point format or something similar, besides the executive summary, which can be a paragraph. Spell check and grammar, of course, is very important. Don't want to have much mistakes. Use your full name, your current location. I recommend just the city and state. Don't put your full address. Personal phone number, personal email that are appropriate. Include your LinkedIn link if you have one. 4 to 6 sentence summary. Again, highlighting your most important skills and achievements and tying them into the industry you're trying to get into. Then some skills, 9 to 12 I recommend. Professional experience going in reverse chronological order. So again, your current or most recent job first and going backwards from there, and really focusing on the roles you held in the last 10 years or so. And you can list out some of the roles that you had before that, but really the last 10 years or so. Job titles for the positions you've had. And don't get too creative with those either. I've seen some people call themselves peacekeepers or marketing ninja or something weird like that. Stick to what your actual title is: police officer, detective, criminal investigator, and things like that. If you have a really unique job title that no one would understand, you could probably put parentheses and you put the job title and then put parentheses and maybe put a civilian translation perhaps or something similar that explains what the role is. But otherwise, stick to whatever your job title is. Company name and location, dates of employment, your key responsibility, and quantifiable achievements using action verbs. This is one of the biggest things I hope you take away from today's lesson is if your resume has absolutely no data on there, if the only numbers on your resume are your phone number, that's a problem. You should have data and metrics in as many bullet points as you can, as well as in your summary section. It's going to be far more impactful than just saying, you don't want to just show them your hard work. You want to tell them, you don't want to tell them, so you want to show them. So anytime you can use any kind of data or metrics, please do so. If you have questions about what kind of things you could add, you can always reach out to me and I can try to give you some advice on those as well. Education, name the institution and the degree type, leave out high school in my opinion. Certs and trainings, top 10 or so, and then tailor your resume towards each application. It might be frustrating, and I totally get it. It really is, but it's gonna be far more effective than just throwing out, generic resumes everywhere you go. It's gonna be far more important. Cover letter, 1 or 2 paragraphs. Was that a question or a statement? A question. Okay. So I think a cover letter should be 1 page is what I think. And the way I like to format it is I do 2 paragraphs, a very short skills section, and a final paragraph. So 2 paragraphs where I'm talking about why I'm applying for the role, why I'm a good fit for it, what drew you to that company. The skills section highlighting skills that you have, ideally ones that are related to that role. And then a final paragraph where you welcome the recruiter or hiring manager to have a conversation with you and that you're excited about the opportunity and that kind of deal. And then sign it at the bottom. But keep it on 1 page. But like I said, for the way I do it, 2 paragraphs, a skill section, and then a 3rd paragraph. But that's how I do it. But nothing much more than that is needed. And again, tailored towards the role you apply for as well. Things not to do. All right, including personal information like age or marital status, political affiliations, sexual orientation, religion, any of those kind of things. There's enough biases in the world the way it is. Try to minimize it on your resume. It's not going to help you. Most likely it will hurt you. You can keep that off for almost basically every case, unless you're applying to maybe like a religious institution where being in that religion is a requirement or something like that. Otherwise, I would leave all that kind of stuff off. Another question, I'm assigned overseas. Should I put my city and county at the top of my resume and put willing to relocate or just leave it off? Most recruiters do look for the location and want to see where you are. So that's a great question. I would put at the very least, you can always just put just willing to relocate, but I would probably put your location as well, but then put parentheses willing to relocate or relocating back to the States or something similar on your resume. But that's actually a really interesting question. I'll have to give that some more thought. But if you're fine with moving, I would definitely put that on there. Yeah, Jeff, I'll give you that some more thought. I'll try to give you another answer tomorrow if you're back. That's a really good question. Some more not to do's, including things like hobbies. Nobody cares. So I've been really fortunate over the last couple of years to have been asked to speak at numerous conferences and events and things like that. And I was actually asked to come speak at the largest law enforcement conference in Ireland. So got to go to Ireland and speak on this topic here. And I got to this slide and I mentioned the hobbies thing, and the entire room kind of was in shock. And the guy who had invited me later on told me, well, in Ireland, having your hobbies on your resume is a really important part of the process. It's like a great icebreaker and things like that. So if you want a job in Ireland, put hobbies on there. But here in the States, leave off hobbies. It's not going to help you at all. It just takes up more space. Lying about qualifications, of course, never lie. It's not going to help you. Avoid cliche and generic phrases. If you say you're a hard worker, no one's going to care. It just doesn't mean anything. Again, rather than say that, don't say you're a hard worker. Just talk about how many cases you've handled or how many calls for service you responded to in a shift or in a month or a year. Things like that's going to be far more impressive than just saying I'm a hard worker, because again, that means absolutely nothing. I think there's another question. Professional experience. What if you taught at 2 police academies at the same time and you split your time between the two? Should I have both separate even though I did the same lessons, or put them together? I think that question, if let's say those are the only 2 roles you've ever had in your career, I think it's fine to separate them. But let's say you have a whole bunch of other experiences as well. You want to be efficient with the space in your resume. Then I would probably put it under one section, list both organizations and both titles unless they're the same. And then in the bullet points, you can explain how it was 2 different organizations, but you were basically doing the exact same task. So I'm assuming you probably have had other roles in your professional career. So what I would probably do is create one section, have both titles, both companies or organizations, excuse me, and then within that section, go into details for both roles. It's just going to give you more room for the other experiences you've had, if that makes sense, I hope. But really good question there as well. I did that actually the other day for a candidate who had very similar roles, and he just happened to have had like 12 different roles in his career. And I knew if I went through all 12 roles, the resume would look ridiculous. So I ended up combining a few roles that were very similar. And that's absolutely a great strategy. I should have also mentioned at the beginning, but I'll mention it here again. If anyone wants me to do a review of the resume, I give free reviews. Well, I'll just give you some feedback on what I think about your resume. And if it helps, great. If not, you can always ignore it, but you can very welcome to email me your resume and give me a day or so, and I'll get you back at least. I'll send you back an email with my opinions of your resume, what you can do better, what I think are great, and just my opinions based on my time in this profession. And yeah, so feel very free to do that. I'll put my email up on the slide here very shortly. But yeah, excessively long resumes, max 3 pages. Honestly, 2 is the best. Again, if you want to go federal, you have to keep it 2 pages. But even the private sector, 2 is ideal. 3 if you really are struggling. Again, those should be really reserved to people with high level, executive level roles. If you're a patrol officer or detective, even though it's phenomenal, I love it, amazing, that's what I was for a lot of time, there's no real reason why you should be going to your 3rd page. Inappropriate emails or work emails, leave that off. Flashy designs, colors, and graphics. I've seen some weird ass things, excuse my language, but I've seen some weird things on resumes. I've seen graphs where they're just putting all kind of weird things on there. I've seen people give themselves scores on like work ethic. They'll say 9 out of 10. Report writing, 10 out of 10, and things like that. It's just weird. Don't do things like that. Crazy colors. As you saw in my template, I do have a color scheme, which is that kind of blue little bit of color. But if you have more than that, it's going to look ridiculous. It shouldn't be a rainbow colors. Either no colors whatsoever, or kind of like the theme like I did. Of course, check for spelling and grammar, and then references is a big one as well, which is unusual for people who maybe have had professional careers in the 2000s or in 1990s and earlier, where references were a thing to put on your resume. Don't put it on your resume. It's just going to take up more space. I promise you, if a company needs references, they will ask you 100%. But if you have a section, a third of your page is references, it's just a third of your page that's wasted where you can't go into your experience. Again, they will ask you for references if they need them. So leave those off your resume as well. All right. Definitely don't want to make this a marketing pitch at all, but if anyone feels completely overwhelmed, don't want to write your resume, I am a resume writer. And what I always offer, this is my book that I wrote a few years ago. It's all about transitioning out of law enforcement. Quick tip, you can buy a book. The ebook's actually 99 cents this week, actually. So if you bought the book, share a LinkedIn post or social media post about it, you get half off my service. So again, something to consider, save some money. And again, if you want my help writing a resume, I'd love to help. But again, it's not a marketing pitch, so beyond what I did here. But anyway, keep that in mind. And I'll go to the beginning now for my email, which is right here. That's my email if you have any questions whatsoever. Okay, Colin. Oh, nice, Colin. Nice to have another call on here. From HR perspective, what is the logic of uploading a resume and cover letter and now enter all the information again with the exact dates again in the company system again? Colin, it makes absolutely 0 sense. I don't know why companies do that. There's absolutely no reason why they should do that. There's very cheap service products, software like my applicant tracking system that can tell a recruiter all that information without having you write it. My company is me, myself, and I have a few part-timers, but again, I'm one-man shop. I don't have the world's largest revenue by any means, and even I can have these software services that tell me people's information, that pulls it out. So why other companies aren't doing it, I have no idea. It's incredibly frustrating, and I feel your frustration. I wish I had a better answer for you. I don't know why they do it. It's very stupid. For anyone else who hasn't experienced it, what he's basically saying is companies will have you upload a resume, which has all your information about your experience, right? And then once you've uploaded your resume, it'll then say, okay, what was your first job? And then you have to write in your first job title and then the dates. What were your main responsibilities? And again, you copy and paste stuff from your resume. And I'll have you do that for your entire work history, your education, your certifications, and whatever else. And it just makes an already long application process just that much longer, especially when you're tailoring your resume and all that as well. So Colin, I wish I had a better answer for you. It's stupid. That's all I can really say. There's no reason behind it. It's a really bad practice that a lot of companies still do. And I've really am against it. And I think any company that does that really needs to really reevaluate their hiring practices. And I think any leader in a company should at least once a year apply for a job themselves inside their company using a fake name and all that, just to see what their candidates are going through. Because right now, companies in the private sector are treating their candidates like crap, which is wild to me because many of these companies still have products and services that their candidates might buy or want to buy in the future. And the way they're treating candidates is pretty gross. When it comes to things like this, when it comes to ghosting and not getting responses back, there's no excuse for it. There's automations nowadays where you can automatically reject people, and why companies aren't at least at the very bare minimum doing that. I really have no idea, but great question, Colin. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. Has to do with the software they're using. Yeah, that makes sense. But again, there's so many options out there that don't do that. I don't know why companies would still use software that require that from their candidates, knowing just how tough this job market is and how much time it takes these candidates to do it. But yeah, I guess it's whatever the company decides to use. But thanks for giving that insight there. So here's my email. If anyone wants to send me their resume, they're very welcome. If there's any questions, you're welcome to ask me questions here. Cost. Yeah, that's true. I don't know. That's weird though, because like my applicant tracking system is like $40 a month or whatever. So it's not really expensive. But again, it's just me. So maybe when it comes to larger teams, I'm sure costs go up significantly. So yeah, but if you have questions, again, ask me now. You can email me separately offline. If it's a very specific question to you and your resume, probably best to do that offline. But again, if there's general questions, feel free to answer here as well. Happy to hang out as long as there's questions. I hope this was useful to you all. Resume writing is definitely something that takes some practice. Again, being in law enforcement, we don't really use it very often. So if it doesn't come naturally to you to write about yourself, you're not alone. It's just not something that we really do very often. So just keep at it, keep working at it. Download my free resources here. Again, if you need help, just do your homework. Again, it doesn't have to be me. There are other people out there as well. Just make sure whoever you decide to use as a resume writer knows what they're doing, has good references, can show you examples of previous ones they've written, and are just transparent throughout the whole process. Other big things too, and then be wary of costs as well, because some of them can get really expensive for sure. Great discussion, Colin. Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for helping folks get a head start on their post-retirement jobs. Wish I could have had access to this info when I retired in 2011. From San Diego PD. Awesome. I'm actually helping a San Diego PD lieutenant right now, which is pretty cool. So nice to have you here. Yeah, it's I mentioned the story yesterday. When I started this company, my assumption and plan was for it to be, but obviously there's a pretty big need for it. And I think we in law enforcement are doing very, very little to help our officers transition to the private sector. When you look at the military, the military has their own recruiting and retention challenges as well. And even they have a transition assistance program helping their people transition to the private sector. Most law enforcement agencies have absolutely nothing, or maybe a general finance kind of type of class for retirement. I have a course, basically this course, but it's a full day length course where I go to agencies and teach. And 19 out of 20 agencies that I approach about this class turn me down, saying that they don't want to teach their people this because of vacancies, recruiting problems, and all that. So I kind of can say back like, hey, if you care about your people at all, which you claim to you care, you should be caring about them both while they're with your agency, but also care about them and their futures and how they will be after their time in uniform as well. And make this class available to, at the very minimum, those who are retiring this year. But most agencies still say no, unfortunately, which is what kind of encouraged me to start this YouTube channel, these type of things. So yeah. Thanks for another overview this evening. See you tomorrow. Awesome. Yeah, tomorrow will be LinkedIn, guys. So come for that as well. Next question. I've been an instructor for a couple of years working as a detective. Is being an instructor considered professional experience or just listed as a skill certification? 100% is a professional experience, 100%. The skills you have as an instructor are very, very valuable. Talking about things like, project management, you're managing a project, personal management, lesson planning, anything else like that, dealing with deficiencies. All those type of skills you have as an instructor are very, very valuable. So I would make sure you highlight that on your resume, especially if you're trying to get into a role where those type of skills are very important. So I would make that honestly a pretty decent sized section of your resume for sure. Good question there though. Jeff, you're welcome. You're all very welcome. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully this is helpful. If there's anything I can do to help in other areas, let me know as well. I'll stick around for a few minutes in case there's questions. But again, I do really encourage you to email me too, either with your resume, with your general questions, anything else. I'm always available. Sorry about that. Go back to my email. Anyone else living the East Coast getting ready for the snowstorm this weekend? Thoughts on Kick resume? I don't know if I know them. I'll have to look them up. I think John wrote that. Let me look them up. I don't know if I can Kick resume. I don't think I know them. I'll look them up. I don't know if they're in law enforcement field or something different. Yeah, sorry, I don't really know them. So no current opinion on them. But I'll do some research tonight and tomorrow and see what I think and give you some thoughts tomorrow. All right, the numbers are slowly dwindling, so I guess everyone's getting ready for bed, which is great. Again, if you have questions, reach out to me. Hope to see you all tomorrow here for the LinkedIn and networking, and then we'll end it all up on Friday when we talk about interviews, reviewing companies and making sure the company's the right fit for you, salary negotiations and things like that as well. So I'm really excited for those next 2 days. So do reach out at any point in time between now and then. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night. If you work the next couple of days, stay safe out there. I really appreciate your service, and I will be seeing you all in less than 24 hours. So excited to see you. Bye, guys.